Welcome to the Victims Advocate podcast, where we explore current events, crime, security, and insights into advocacy for victims of violent crime. My name is Brandon Stein, and I am the Victims Advocate. Helping victims of violent crime is what I do, and you can find me at www.steinlaw.com or www.victimadvocate.com. Let's hit it. Welcome to the Victims Advocate podcast. My name is Brandon Stein. I am a personal injury attorney, but most importantly, I am the Victims Advocate. Now, this is a brand new podcast. This is our first episode, and I think it's really, really important to give you all an understanding of who I am and what I do. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about what this podcast is going to bring for you and why I think it's going to be so important on a weekly basis to check in and see what's going on. We're dealing with security issues. So as a victim's advocate, I'm that guy who helps those who are injured. I'm that guy who helps those who get shot, stabbed, raped, assaulted, and all those criminal acts lead to injury. The state attorneys, prosecutors, police officers, they're not going to help you in that regard. They'll help finding a criminal and prosecuting a criminal, but then where does that leave the victim? There's no advocate for the victim in the criminal justice system that really, truly has the back and provides the representation of the victim that's needed. Because ultimately, what we have is a system that is designed to put people behind bars, but it's not designed to ensure that there's proper restitution, proper compensation that's provided to those victims of these violent crimes. Many times, those victims of violent crimes, they're used in the prosecution cases. They're used as witnesses because they're necessary to prosecute those cases, and they're important, and what the prosecution does is important. What the law enforcement officers do is very, very important. But what I want y'all to know is you need a victim's advocate. You need a guy like me to step in and have the back of the victim to make sure that victim gets the compensation he or she deserves. Simple as that. How does it work? If our victims get shot, our victims are those who get assaulted, who get stabbed, all right, and they suffer serious and sometimes permanent or catastrophic injuries. Who do they go after? How can they get compensation for what happened to them? It's very simple. When you're on a property, when you're somewhere, when you're in a public place, and there's a crime that occurs, there's a reason that crime occurs. And you got to point the finger, not necessarily at the guy who did the crime, but you got to look higher up. All right? You got to make sure you're looking at the property owners, because it's really those property owners or the managers of the properties who bear the ultimate responsibility, who have the ultimate task of ensuring that your safety is important. Because when you step onto a property, I don't care if it's a supermarket, I don't care if it's an apartment building, I don't care if it's a bank. When you step into those walls and you're under their control, they have a duty, they have a responsibility to provide reasonable security measures to make sure that you're protected in the event that a crime occurs. And they have the superior knowledge. They know that maybe their apartment complex is in a bad area. And I got plenty of clients, plenty of people who I advocate for coming out of Liberty City, West Park, Opelika, Miami Gardens, Homestead, Lauderhill, some areas in southeast Florida and around the state as well, where there's lower income housing, maybe Section 8 housing, and you have owners who collect subsidiaries or money from the government where they're supposed to make improvements on the property and properly manage it, but instead they line their pockets instead of making changes or providing efforts on the property to ensure that security measures are taken. So that's the biggest issue here, is that you have the little guy on a property who's at the mercy of the property owner, who doesn't do what's necessary to prevent crime. So when that crime invariably occurs, and it occurs time and time again, who's the victim of it? The victims are you. The victim is the individual, the little guy. Who's he go after? The state attorney or prosecution don't help. There are local victim advocates within the counties or within municipalities that do their best. But remember, they're restricted by the government, by the budget that the government provides them in terms of resources. I don't have a budget. When I'm a victim advocate for someone, I'm advocating for them 100%, and there is no ceiling on the possibility of getting compensation when you get hurt. So I don't care if it's 2 a.m., 11 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm the guy they call. I'm the one who's out there in the community helping each and every one of those individuals who venture onto these properties expecting safety, but find quite the opposite. So what's really, really important to understand is what I do is I advocate for the little guy and making sure that when crime occurs, I'm the one who they call. All right, and with this particular show that we have here, we're going to be tackling some of the issues of the day, current events, because there's a lot of main media type of events that deal with security, that deal with negligent security, that deal with victim advocacy. Whether it's, the P. Diddy issue that's in the news, whether it was the Jeffrey Epstein issue that was in the news, whether it was the Michigan State harassment scandal involving the gymnasts that was in the news. Those all involve victims of crime, alleged crime, right? But nevertheless, they are victims. They're claiming injury of alleged crimes that had been committed by some pretty powerful people. So who I help are those, and those are the issues we're going to be tackling during this show, whether it's current events and also changes in the law. Because here in the state of Florida, it's very big business friendly. It's a conservative state, nothing wrong with that, but when you have a conservative state, guess who finances these politicians? Big insurance companies, big companies. And guess who gets affected by it? People like you and me. We're affected by the changes that are made by powerful politicians who are bought and paid for by other companies, insurance companies. And when they say bought and paid for, what happens is after those campaigns are contributed to by these insurance carriers or these big companies that own these properties or insure these properties, then what do we have? We have a situation where there are laws that are passed that are extremely favorable for them and unfavorable for the little guy. Just 2 years ago in 2023, there was major legislation, major laws that were passed that affected you and your safety on properties. And that's a big deal. And those are issues that we're going to be addressing during this show. I get calls all day. All day I'm getting calls from victims, from clients, from everyone who needs help. It doesn't stop, and I don't ask for it to stop. When you call me, you get representation, you get aggressive advocacy. And what we're going to be dealing with, not only are we going to be dealing with current events, not only are we going to be dealing with changes in the law, but we're also going to have some interesting guests on. And we've already had a lot of bookings that are set to air in the future, where we have guests, former law enforcement officers, former government officials, CIA officials, private investigators, as well as attorneys who deal with searching of assets, or criminal defense attorneys who deal with the prosecution side of things day in, day out. And they're going to bring some interesting perspective on exactly what comes into play when you're dealing with certain crimes, how there's always a victim of a crime. Very, very rarely are there victimless crimes. So we're going to have some really interesting guests who are going to be here to give insight into advocacy, give insight into maybe some of these current event issues, and give insight into what they do for a living, what they're dealing with every day. So look, I'm really excited. This is a great opportunity to have this platform and really promote what's really, really important, which are victim rights. And that's what we're about. We're about the safety rights of victims and making sure that there's an advocate for each and every victim. And that's what we do. That's what I do. It's very, very important because the little guy is not represented well enough by the big people up there in the legislature, by the big politicians, by the big companies. They may say they care, but they don't care as long as their pockets remain lined and they keep getting paid, and paid. That's who's in control. So we have to make sure that we fight back and there's a resistance against them and they're held accountable and justice is served, not only in the criminal context, but in the civil context. And the way we serve justice, the remedy that we look to is of always money damages, because that's where they get hurt, when you hit them in their pocketbook. That's how changes are made, by continuing to fight and fight and fight, and when you want to give up, you fight some more. And that's where we come in. So I'm really, really excited to roll this out, and as a victim advocate, I'm excited to talk to y'all for weeks upon weeks upon weeks coming forward.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Brandon Stein, and I am the Victim's Advocate. Your voice matters, and if you or someone you know needs representation, visit steinlaw.com or victimadvocate.com for more information. See you next time.